Okay, well, welcome to the Flow Sport podcast. And thank you very much. We're joined today by Gordon Smith. Gordon, I don't think you need much of an introduction. I'm sure you're a household name in most households, to be fair, but if you could just tell us a bit about you for the people that don't know you, please.
Well, I'm an old man to a lot of people these days. Really. Career was a long time ago, but no, I started off, I had a chance to sign for Rangers, Celtic and Kilmarnock. I was 14 as a schoolboy for him, but I signed for Kilmarnock, my dad's advice, and he did say it was, if you make it quicker at Kilmarnock, you'll get more of a chance. The big clubs will come back in for you then. So it was good advice. So I signed for Kilmarnock, and my mum was very keen on me doing education, and she didn't want me to leave school. So I stayed on doing my hires, and I actually got in the Kilmarnock first team while I was still at school. So I was playing there, and then she was very keen for me to do my degree. So I went and did a degree after that.
While you were still playing?
Still playing, stayed on at Kilmarnock, did my degree, and I just started a job. Club had gone part-time. I just started a job as a marketing development manager when I got a phone call to say Rangers had bought me, and I had to go to Ibrox and sign. Wow. So I signed for Rangers. I was there 3 years and won the treble my first year, won 2 Scottish Cups, 2 League Cups as well. And then what happened was I was sold, after 3 years, I was sold to Brighton. And it was a record fee for me, but I wasn't too keen to go at the time, but I was glad it did happen because I really enjoyed my time there. Played for Brighton, then I went to Manchester City, and I was 2 years there. And then I had a short spell at Oldham Athletic. I went on loan at first, and then played the rest of the season at Oldham. And then I went to Austria, and I played in Austria for 15 months. And then the club was struggling a little bit financially, and they asked if I would mind leaving. And I said, if I get a club, I'll leave. And I went to Switzerland. I went to FC Basel. So after that, I came back to Scotland, and the amazing thing about it, Colin, was I was very fit, but none of the clubs would take me because I was 33 years old, coming on to 34, and even some of the managers said, we'll get a lot of abuse if we sign a player of your age. And I said, well, I'm very fit for my age. I said, so test me and then see if I'm fit. But they just said it was an age thing. So I couldn't get a club, and I had to give up playing. So I went back into, it was a company came and approached me, financial services. I became a financial advisor. And I did that for 2 years, and then
that's through your degree you'd done that?
Yeah, right. I'd done a lot of training in finance while I was actually still playing as well. So then I got this job as a financial advisor, independent, and then I got the St Mirren assistant manager's job. Tony Fitzpatrick, the manager, called me, and I became the assistant manager, and I did that job for about 3 years, and then I left there and went back into the media. I started working in the media at that time. I'd been doing a bit while I was at St Mirren, and then the media approached me in order to do more work with them. So I did all that, and then I went to work for a firm of chartered accountants as their financial services manager. And while I was there, I advised them to start up an agency, a football agency business, because we had a lot of football clients through myself. And we started an agency business, and then I decided as I was doing all the work in it, I decided to take the business on my own, and I became an agent on my own outright. I was an agent now for about 8 or 9 years, and then I got approached by the SFA, the Football Association in Scotland, and got offered the chief executive job there, and I did that for 3 years. Then I left there and went back out, and then I got approached I was back in the media, approached by Rangers to become basically the director of football there. I had advised the guy about having a director of football because it wasn't really a position in Scotland that was getting much accredited in those days. But I advised to do it. Then the next thing he offered me the job. But after 6 months, the club went into administration, and I left. And then I went back in working, doing the media stuff. And that's basically, I've been doing media and doing business development since then.
That's incredible. So you've had a bit of experience, shall we say,
yeah.
In all different levels of football. And it's going into this deeper, we'll start pulling things apart to explain a little bit further. But first of all, can you talk about walking away from Rangers, please? Because obviously that was massive to the whole of Scottish football, what happened when they went into, liquidation or whatever you want to call it. So how did that affect, you and your position in there? Yeah,
well, I was only there 6 months, as I say, and once or twice I had spoken to the owner, Craig White, about is there a danger here? Is there a problem? We can get into administration. He said, I don't think so. We're okay. It's not going to happen. Then all of a sudden it did happen. And I was only there, I say, 6 months. And when it did happen, the people were called in right away in order to run the club. And I actually went and said to them, look, I'm not required here anymore. because you're going to find it very hard to have a director of football who's going to be like giving advising on recruitment and things like that. And also the salary I was on, I felt that if I left the money, other people could maybe maintain their positions at the club and retain their job. And that's why I left, just in order so the club had that money and to use. So I was really trying to protect other people's jobs, and I just felt it's time for me to walk away, and I did.
No, that was nice, and again, it shows how much of a gentleman you are, and your morals as a human being, which
thank you.
You don't usually see that around, and you don't hear about it in the mainstream media either. They like to.
Yeah, I just felt it was the thing. I just felt it was the right thing to do to help other people, because I say I was just there a short time. I was new to the position, and when that happened, when the administration side it happened, before the liquidation even came in, even with administration, I thought it was the right time for me to move out.
Absolutely. Well, again, hats off to you for that. Now, You mentioned about being the chief executive of the Scottish Football Association, and that was about 14 years ago, if I'm right.
Yes.
And could you tell me a wee bit about your role in there? Because obviously you've got one of the highest name badges, in terms of the level of, the chief exec's kind of top of the tree.
Yes.
So what did your role include in there?
Well, what happened was I got approached about the job, and I didn't even apply for it. There was people applying, and they said, "You're not going to apply?" I said, "No." And then eventually they came and they asked me to come and do an interview after there was a whole set of interviews were at Hampden Park for the job, and I just didn't go. But they then came, the recruitment company asked me to come to their offices in Glasgow on my own, and I did an interview on my own, and I was very relaxed about it. But I hadn't done my due diligence on it, and I didn't realise exactly what my role would be. You're thinking chief executive, you're going to be able to run the show, and that's not the case. It was very much a case of I could make recommendations, but I couldn't change things. And that's what everything I did had to go through a committee or through a board of directors, whatever. There was nothing that I could actually say, this is what we're doing, because every single decision, and I couldn't understand that. Being chief executive, I felt that you should be in a position to make that. Now, I'd done a lot of planning once I was offered the job. Before I even took over, I was going to do a lot of things. And some of the things I got away with because I got accepted by the board of directors, and they approved it. Things like bringing in retrospective punishment for cheating for players. We were the first country in the world to do that when we brought that in, so that if a player was caught on TV, he actually been benefited from getting a penalty or an ordering off. We were the first country that could then punish the player retrospectively. I wanted to form a committee of ex-players who had played abroad in order to get their experience and bring in the best advice for the changes that I thought we should make. I wanted to bring in, to even change the structure of youth football and even change the season times and all that sort of thing. And even the fact, I was in favour of goal line technology before it got put through.
I would like to elaborate on that with the goal line technology, because now you're 14 years previous.
Yeah.
Now, we're now talking about kind of bringing it back into Scottish football just now, but they're also talking about the costs that it's going to cost, the training and, the constant. But we see through kind of all the European games and stuff how much easier it is for the refs to be able to make decisions and not be penalised themselves for it. Because, the pressure they're under, especially, cup finals and things like that, you've got to realise that sometimes one set of eyes isn't enough.
Yeah, well, I was very much in favour of VAR, and it wasn't called that then, but I actually proposed it. I was actually in the football committee of both UEFA and FIFA, and it was all ex-players on these committees. Like people like Pele, Eusebio, Bobby Charlton, Franz Beckenbauer, Michel Platini. That was who was on them. And I proposed in 2 occasions with each committee, bringing in VAR to actually look at decisions being made so that they could be corrected immediately. Because I said, why have the cameras at the game? People sitting at home can tell that something is wrong, but the referee's not getting told. I thought it was ridiculous, and I wanted to bring it in. But even then, I got voted out. People all voted against me, saying, no, we don't want this. This has never been in football before. And I felt change had to be made. And that's why it's one of the problems that I have felt with football over time, Colin. The fact is that, we're a bit slow to make changes. And when they have brought it in now, that's because I think once it's out there and people begin to think a bit more about it. But see, if you initially bring something in football, I even found at the SFA, or I found the same at UEFA and FIFA level, the initial factor is normally the time when they just say, no, we don't want it. That's right. And people react to things in football, but if something's new, initial, and they don't have time to think about it and consider it over a length of time, that's when they reject things.
See, well, I find people are creatures of habit.
Yeah.
You know, and when you find it's not so much that they're not willing to try it, it's they just don't know what the effects are going to be. And most people like safety.
Yes.
And that's why they're creatures of habit. Now, obviously, going forward between you and I and our conversations, we're going to look into kind of different parts of that.
Yes.
First of all, you said something to me in a previous conversation we had, and it was talking about football sense and not common sense.
Yes.
Now, that to me was a fantastic way to put things, because if you're talking football sense, people don't really want to change, because this is the way it's always been done.
Yeah.
Because football, as much as sport and anywhere else in the world, it's an institution.
I know.
You know, so to be able to go in and try and change something in an institution is very, very difficult. That's like me walking into a university and saying, I just want you to start teaching like this. They're going to look at it and they're going to go, okay, Colin, right, on you go, up the road, off you go. And this is where it doesn't allow people to think, you know, and you were ahead of your time 14 years ago, you know, and you would almost say psychic about what we're going to need all this kind of time down the line. However, when you're looking at, you know, they've brought the VAR in, they've brought in, you know, the other things that you put in.
Yes.
Talking about the way players are, you know, and there was something you said 14 years ago, and again, you and I, we've been now talking a while. We met through, obviously, your daughter, Libby.
Yeah.
She spoke a little about what I do, and we'll talk about that probably in another podcast. But when we were brought together, it was almost like two worlds colliding.
Yes.
And it's like what you were talking about 14 years ago is what's really the matter within sport as a whole at the moment.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's a big factor, because one of the things that I've looked at, I mean, I've had this argument over a lot of years, Colin, that I used to say to people that they would say, oh, what do you need to be a top class player? And they would say, oh, it's about ability and your level of fitness. And I used to say, actually, you're missing out the third part, which is the most important, which is mentality. Yeah. And there's no question about it that mentality is a major factor. People can call it confidence or whatever, but you also need to be the right kind of attitude. I've seen loads of players who were very talented who didn't have the right mentality. Now, the reason they didn't have it is hard to explain. It wouldn't be maybe because of problems they had in their background, problems they had in their family life, problems they maybe had with the manager who's taking them, problems maybe even with their teammates. We don't know these factors, but there's no doubt about it that it's not just down to ability and obviously fitness. Mentality is a crucial aspect, and there's been many cases where players who have not been that talented have become very successful because they had a great mentality. And when we spoke about it, when we first met, and you told me what you were doing, and I said, that's amazing, because that is something that I've been very keen to bring into football for a long time, is to actually look at the individual characters of players and then try and get the best of them, trying to solve what that character can bring and how it maybe even can be improved in order that lad can actually, or that girl playing football can actually be at their best.
Absolutely. And, you know, just to go on to that, it's like I work I'm Scotland's only flow expert.
Yeah.
And this is what I do. So I get people to flow intentionally in their life. And what people don't realise is players are put in a pedestal, which, you know, they're good, they've worked hard, they go into something at a young age, you know, they grind and they grind and they grind until they make it. But then you've got to effectively play ball, pardon the pun, you know, you've got to play ball with everything, you've got to speak the right way, you know, you're not allowed to go out of doing this, you've got to think the right way, you've got to be able to, you know, not answer back. It's very much an institution. So what I believe is the way people are affected, they're not given the chance to talk about their home life, their relationships.
No.
They're not able to talk about what's right and what's wrong or how they feel that they're being spoken to, because they'd be scared to lose that place within the game or not chosen, you know, for the next game. The last thing a player wants to be in any sport is to be on the bench.
Yes.
You know,
well, that's it. I mean, I've only got 11 positions in a Saturday that play. You know, there's others who are on the bench, and there's others who aren't even included at all. So there's that aspect at all. That's mentally challenging as well for any player. I mean, I found that myself when I was ever left out the team. It's time to time. I just had a real problem with it. I improved things a little bit when I started to blame myself for not playing rather than blame the manager. I thought, what is it I'm doing that I can improve here? And I did improve it. And sometimes what happened was, it was a classic example. Once the manager left me out of a game, and I was playing for Brighton, and I went to him on the Monday and I said, well played, by the way, we got a good result on Saturday. And he was really, well, thanks for saying that. He said, the next game, I was back in the team the next game, and they'd won. Now, I found that little bit things like that do help. I mean, it's all to do with the fact is, you can build relationships with people, and relationships can be affected greatly in the football world, and that's why it's so important, as I say, to look at these little aspects of how relationships work within the game, because I say, that you've got a whole squad of players there, and in my day, I don't know if it's different now, but my day really, they didn't really bother about your personal life, family life, and they didn't ask any questions like that. That was never came into it. It was just about how you actually played on a Saturday was the most important thing.
Absolutely. Now, I've had conversation with other football players as well over time, and one that keeps kind of cropping up is that you can get a £50 million player and you can sign them. All it takes is one wrong interaction with the manager or the coach or another team player to take them down to a £5 million or a £0 million player. And then they'll say, well, where did their ability go? Because your ability doesn't actually go away.
No, there's been loads of examples of that. There's no question about that sometimes, it can be also from the point of view of sometimes when a player becomes the most expensive player the club's signed, a big signing, that can have an effect on him as well. People don't take into account the fact that it's hard for a player to cope with being an expensive player because he's worked his way through. He's maybe come through the youth system at the club he's been with initially. He's come to the top. He's been a success, and then all of a sudden somebody pays a huge fee for him, and he's not the same player. I also found at times what I found was it's definitely the case in football, and it's not in life in general, but football was a case of it where players sometimes, when they achieve something, they actually go down the way too. And what happens as the reason is it's subconscious. It's because they've achieved their goal. And when their goal is achieved, a lot of people just step back and think,
switch off.
I've made it, they switch off. As I say, it's a subconscious thing, and that's why you need to keep resetting goals. So these things are important in the game in order to have targets to think, I need to do this, I'm going to improve, I'm going to get better. But a lot of the times, the players don't have the help in order to do that, and the people who can actually help them make these decisions.
Absolutely. And I love what you just said there, because goal setting is very important.
Yeah.
But when you reach that, again, setting the other one. So again, it's constant. We spoke about it before about, what's first is the stick of the carrot, you dangle the carrot or whatever. But what we've worked out, and the scientist John from Flowcess, that I've been working with now for 4 years and learning with, he understands that unconsciously is where the energy is gained from.
Wow.
So rather than actually goal setting, it's about how the interactions come across and how they come together with other players, the managers, even the directors and stuff, everybody all coming together as one to bring everyone together and gain that energy. So if you're gaining energy constantly, you don't need to focus. Well, obviously you focus on the goal on the pitch. Otherwise there's no point playing football. But when it comes to your actually aim of living life and actually your role as as well as you're a team member and you're playing on the pitch, you've still got to go to training. You've still got to go to all, to learn. You've got to go home. And the biggest thing to affect your work is your home life.
Yes.
And the biggest thing to affect your home life is your work.
Yeah.
Because it's strenuous if you have a partner and you're away all the time, if you're playing abroad or you're playing in another country or even just away a few nights in your own country.
Yes.
But then if you're getting hassled at home, you're not going to be thinking about that when you go to work. And what we have been looking at and what you and I have been discussing, we'll go into that next kind of podcast, but really kind of talking about what flow is. Because you went to training, Vinny, 3 days a week.
Oh, yeah, maybe 5 days a week even. I mean, when I was abroad, even it was 5 days and 2 afternoons, 5 mornings and 2 afternoons a week. We trained harder abroad than we had here. In this country, generally you were 4 days a week. Maybe get a Wednesday off and you train Monday, Tuesday. If there was no match midweek, you get Wednesday off.
Yep. So flow to me is repetition so much that you don't even think about it. It's like you get into a way of working. So if you're in your defensive position, your forward position, and you practice, once it gets to game day, you're so good and you're so in flow that you're not then thinking about where the ball's coming, because if you see it there, it's going to land at your feet here. If you had to put this part of your foot, you're going to get it in there. So this is where the physicality stuff comes in, the fitness and the really hard training. But what happens if you've had a problem with your family, a loss of a loved one, a fight with your other half before you come into that game? That takes you out of flow. Because then you're having to consciously push yourself, which is really, really difficult. And when we start to, as we start to unfold exactly what we're introducing, we start to see where the holes are in sport as a whole, but obviously in the game of football, we're relating to us because Obviously, football's your sport, you know.
Yeah.
But when we start to look at the holes, it's like we try and paper the cracks.
Uh-huh.
You know, and it's like everyone kind of looks at effects. Everyone looks, well, they're not playing, so we're going to put them on a bench.
Yeah.
They don't realise that a conversation or something, you know, dissolved. Well, how can we help fix this for you?
Yeah.
We'll put you back into flow as such.
Yeah.
Which allows it, because I've watched it over the years many a time with the amount of people that are they're being abused, and I don't mean intentionally abused, so I don't let anyone take that the wrong way, but they're being abused because they're not being helped.
Yes.
You know, so they feel that they can't open up, or they feel they can't come out. And again, we'll go into this kind of further down the line, but you know, team cohesion, performance, individual and as a team, you know, injuries, these all come from people that are out of flow.
Yeah.
Now, if you aren't winning, you're losing. That's the in the game of football or any other sport. If you're not winning, you're losing. You can't draw all the way through the season, you know. So if you're not winning, you're losing. So that obviously puts pressure on people as well.
Yeah.
And it actually changes the interaction. So if your manager, for talking's sake, felt under pressure, you know, he's just got into a new role. He's now sitting 5th in the league, where last season you were 2nd.
Yeah.
He's going to have to try and push you harder.
Yes.
But if he's not doing that in a way, or she, well, just he or she, right, regardless of whether it's men or women's football, they can't push you physically without understanding you as a unique person.
Yeah.
You know, as a unique player, as a unique human being as such.
Uh-huh.
So it makes it difficult to find that exact interaction that's going to spark your, you know, your pizzazz, you know, whatever it is that you call that inside you, that allows you to want to be hungry, that allows you to be in flow, that gives you that, you know, confidence or that hunger to be able to go and win, you know, because
definitely. I mean, every player should have their own motivation.
Yep.
But you know, and I feel people talk about managers motivating players, and I've always been totally against that, and said that, you know, no, they shouldn't. But managers can demotivate players without doubt.
A lot easier.
But players, the motivation should come from them personally.
Yep.
And every player should be self-motivated. But sometimes managers, I've seen it before, just the way a manager maybe talks to the player, or maybe how he's been dealing with them, or whatever, that can have a big effect on it. You know, even as I say, I've seen it happen at, you know, in dressing rooms, like at half time, the manager will say something, big arguments, you know, and it's like, I remember one time a manager, I won't say who it was, he turned on a player at half time and he said, "You've given the ball away 3 times," and he mentioned you gave it away then, and the player said, "Excuse me," he says, "See, when I give the ball away deliberately, have a go at me. Otherwise, don't say anything, because it's accidental."
Yeah.
That's what he said. So the little things like that are key to how relationships build. And sometimes I say managers will react to a player having a go back at them, whatever. I've seen cases of that too. So there's a lot that happens, and to see it's very, very. That's why I'm talking to yourself about what you're involved in. It's very, very significant in terms of saying, well, you know, it's more to the fact that there's a lot of different characters out there, and players are all a measure of one type of character or another. You could have a whole team of different characters, and it's how they actually can be dealt with by the manager and how they interact with each other that's crucial to whether that team is good or that team is bad.
And it's not a one size fits all.
No.
You know, but they have got a lot of good things, and you know, we've got sports psychologists in now that they didn't used to have.
Yes.
Which again, they come in and they help talk through the effects of behaviour.
Yeah.
You know, the effects of how to speak to people and all these things, which is fantastic. And I love, you know, the fact that they're trying to make as much effort as they possibly can to try and help people.
Yeah.
However, there's an aspect that I feel, and I don't know if you feel the same, that there's just something missing. Do you know, if we try and go with the effects, what's causing the effect in the first place?
Yeah.
And this is where, you know, I work with Flowcess and you know, what's going to be happening with Flow Sport is it's looking at the first cause.
Uh-huh.
The first cause of everything. So when you speak to people and you say, do you believe in a first cause? Do you believe in causality?
Mm-hmm.
If they say no, and all they look at is an effect, that's harmful.
Yes.
You know, and I feel that there's quite a lot of harm being done in the game itself.
Yeah.
In society. You know, it doesn't even matter if you look at, say we take ourselves out of sport, relationships of any different kind, everything's harmful because people get blamed for the effect of what they've done or what they're doing, rather than, well, let's look at why that happened. You know, because I remember you and I have obviously spoke at length and lots of different things, but you always ask players when you were a coach, well, what made you do that?
Yeah.
And see that simple question.
Uh-huh.
It's just enough, rather than shouting somebody saying you gave that ball away or you
Yeah.
did this. Why? You'll either get I don't know
Uh-huh.
because they don't know because
Yeah.
their head was somewhere else.
I found I used to get a reaction after a better reaction after a while, because I would actually ask them rather than say, here's what you did, and tell them off for what they did. I used to go down the line of saying, well, what did you do? What should you have done?
Yeah.
What would you do next time? And then what happened was, after a little while of doing that, I found that the players, when I started talking to them right away, they would go, I know what I did, and they would tell me without me even asking any questions,
Yeah.
because they were getting into the habit of it, and that helped. I felt that they was helping them because they were becoming thoughtful in terms of what mistakes they were making, what they should be doing, and all that thing. And that's
Of course.
a major thing in the game, is to be able to think about what you're.
Exactly, but they're also growing because
Yeah.
you're teaching them through themselves
Yes,
without kind of pointing the finger and without telling them exactly what you saw,
correct.
because they might have saw it differently.
Absolutely, but the great thing now about what you're doing now is the fact that I'm learning that a lot of it would have been to do with the individual personality of that player,
Yep.
in terms of how they dealt with things and how they could deal with it, and that's something we didn't really know, and that's something even psychologists have come in and done a great job in the sport in terms of helping. But this is a stage beyond that, in terms of it's psychology for each individual as well, and identifying the person and what their strengths are,
Yep.
what their weaknesses are, how they should actually be dealt with as
Yep.
well, and how they should be dealing with other people too. That you can actually help them in that respect too. So it's a big factor.
Oh, it's huge. So we talk about a personality as a mask. That's the persona that you use in the situation. It's based on situational behaviour, or what's round about you environmentally.
Yeah.
What we talk about in flow sess and in flow sport is about behind the mask. Who is that person uniquely?
Yes.
So if you're acting like a big hard man on the pitch, people will go, right, well, we'll better watch how we talk to him, or watch out for Gordon, who's going to come and get
Yeah.
you, But really, if behind that you were a nice, caring, kind person, you're not going to show that because of the persona that you put on.
Yes.
So if I talk to you like the persona that you're putting on the pitch,
Yep.
we're missing out how to energize you, and that's by talking to you as the human being that you are behind that.
Yes.
Now, what I feel is that the thing that's missing is the flow sport method, and this is where, again, we'll talk about it in another podcast, but going into this and finding the first cause of a human behavior, or the first cause of a human as their unique self.
Yes.
As I say, it's like you've got personality, which is what we all go on, which is an effect of the environment.
Yep.
If we look at that person's uniqueness, and that's what causes the personality, that's where I feel is the golden nugget to be able to interact with folk. Because how many times have we watched a game either together or even before we knew each other, and you sit and you look and you go, they're shouting at that guy, there was no need. He literally lost the ball, as you say, or he's done something wrong, and he starts being penalised. He's going to lose energy.
Yeah.
He's going to be demotivated by not only the other players on the field,
Yes.
but by the management, by the coaches, and then the fans.
Yeah.
And then you've got all the online stuff.
Yes.
And then they start getting hassled, you're rubbish, you're this, you're that. I won't obviously use any profanity,
No, I know,
but
yeah.
some of the abuse they get is terrible.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I remember at times when I was a young player getting into the team at first, Kilmarnock, I was 17 years of age when I was in the first team. And I did find it was quite funny that a little bit nervous at first, and then I had to realise that, no, you need to do the good things early on. You need to actually make clever passes early on and whatever, because then the fans are right behind you. If you start up and making mistakes, they're on your back right away, and then you have to cope with that, because then you're thinking, well, you become a bit scared to be getting on the ball in case. So what I did was I tried to do some clever things early on, and if it worked and the fans were, I could tell they were right behind me, I then took a big lift from that, and my confidence was great right throughout the game.
Yeah. But you also find now there's this new thing, it's called cancel culture, that we find in society now, and it's like, if it's not right, just get rid of it. This is what they're doing now. Do you know that a team loses 2 games and the manager's now, right, get him out?
I know.
And you're like, how can you possibly, why can you not find out what's wrong in his life?
Yeah.
'Cause again, they're just as important as a player.
Correct.
If they're not in flow and they're not doing their things and they're not being interacted with, they might feel pressure. They're working with these guys that are playing. So yes, they've got experience, but these guys are the ones that are current, that are out there doing the thing.
Yeah.
So again, there's a pressure on both sides. So is it not important that all interactions are good? Because you'll find people feel that in my experience, people feel when they get to management level, they feel that they've made it and they can talk to people the way that they want to be spoken to, rather than how the actual player or the staff want to be spoken to. And that's very important. From a young age, we are taught to speak to people the way that you want to be spoken to. But you and I are two totally different human beings altogether. If I was to speak to you the way that I want to be spoken to, that's abuse. That's effectively what it is. It might not be really bad abuse where you've been physically hurt or anything, but it's abuse. Because I am not giving you your place as your man or as your human being, you know? And this is where I feel kind of going forward, we'll be able to kind of break this down further and explain. So, you know, the effects of the homework balance is where obviously Flow Sport is looking to come in and allow people. So it's not about talking about problems. It's not about, you know, breaking this down, because if you talk about a problem, you're just going to be more involved in the problem. So what we're looking at is the dissolve, right? So when you dissolve something, it's not there anymore. And then that means it lets things be free, you know, emotional attachments, mental attachments, which allows people to be into flow. So I'm really excited, obviously, about moving forward with yourself and Libby, and really taking things to a new level. And as much as we would love the game to change, we're not looking to change the game. And that's the thing. I can't go in and teach a coach or a manager how to coach or manage, because I'm not a coach or a manager.
But it could change the game, because what you're looking at is a situation where, you know, in terms of a certain team, and if you know the uniqueness of each individual in that team, then you can deal them in a certain way and maybe get more out of these people. So actually, by doing that, it could actually change the game in respect of players. I think in this system you're bringing in, which I think is tremendous. I think that players will then be identified and dealt with in the right manner. That means you get the best out of them, because one of the things you're trying to do as a manager of any team is get the most out of your team. And that's the successful managers. We've seen some managers take over a group of players who are struggling, and all of a sudden that group of players becomes a different group. You know, and I've seen loads of examples of that. What's the reason for that? It's because how that manager's treating them. Now, once you know the uniqueness of each of your individual players, it's going to be a lot easier at times for the people who, not even a new person coming in, but whoever's in charge of the team, to know exactly what's required with that group of players individually.
Absolutely. And I love what you said. It will change the game. It's not the fact that it will, but
it will.
As much as we'll introduce it, what's the actual best thing is it's the managers and the coaches that are so invested in the game that they'll be making the changes. You know, all we'll be doing is giving information and giving them the keys to open up and unlock the extended potential within all the players.
Absolutely. And even the sports psychologists at the clubs will have an advantage from this too, because they'll be able to come in and because of their experience in psychology anyway, they'll be able to understand it and be able to help the manager and the coaches to develop the right sort of standards for the players.
Absolutely. And you've spoken about psychology, you know, at Caledonia University. You're up there and you give speeches and, you know, these things because you know the psychology of the game. Just like the sports psychologists know, we can't teach them to be a sports psychologist. That's why they spent 4 years or more at university to be able to do it. We're not wanting to take that away or you know, disregard it, because it's needed. It's absolutely needed. But what we have to offer is, you know, it's the stage before this to allow them to understand where the behaviour's coming from, where the dissolve is, rather than trying kind of plaster over the cuts, plaster over the cracks, because this is the way that life is kind of taking its turn in every aspect of it. It's doing so. If we start allowing, you know, these sports stars, you know, these people that have dedicated their life to sport and whatever, if we're able to allow them to see, you know, the rest of the people in the world will be able to see that as well and want to better their interactions and say, well, if they're doing it, we can do it. So this is so it's almost like a revolution as such. You know, that we want to start. We want everyone's interactions to be better because again, they are, you know, a lot of the time very negative, and people don't realise they're doing it because they don't have you know, the information.
I mean, it's across the world. This is an element that will be brought in across loads of different spheres. Like, I mean, from education right through businesses and all that. But the main thing from my point of view, the reason I wanted to get so interested in it was because it's for sport and particularly for football.
You know, again, with yourself, when you and I started speaking, when you were instantly engaged, that's when you know there's something there. You know, and as much as you're an intelligent man that's got a lot of experience, If you think there's something else there, that shows obviously
Yeah.
your credentials kind of speak for themselves. I've worked with lawyers, I've worked with psychologists, I've worked with, teachers, I've worked with, people in building sites, I've worked with homeless people,
Yeah.
I've worked every kind of generation or every type of human being that we have or any status, class, whatever. I've worked with all these people and I've helped people intentionally get to flow. And, going on to the next episode, I think it's definitely going to open up and allow people to see it because, we've got to look at some harsh realities of the way life is. And, when people don't talk about the elephant in the room, it's just going to sit there.
Yeah, I know.
And then that's it. So we would like the elephant in the room dissolved.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to do. So there's no elephant in the room and everyone's free to speak, to be open, to understand. And I do genuinely believe it is. But listen, thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to the next one. Thanks very
Me too.
much.
Cheers, Colin.
Cheers.